Welcome everyone to this episode of Denpulse. I'm Shubhra Sinha, VP Marketing at Denave. Denave is a company that helps businesses accelerate revenue through AI-powered demand gen strategies. Denpulse is a podcast series by Denave where in season 2, Signal to Sales, we are dissecting the ever-evolving world of B2B marketing, especially now with the whole AI automation wave. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by George Coudounaris, founder of the B2B Playbook, a fantastic resource hub for B2B marketers like myself. Welcome, George.
Shubhra, thank you so much for having me on. I'm very excited to be here. And I've got to say, congratulations, 10 out of 10 pronunciation of my last name. I think that's the best I've ever heard guesting on a podcast.
I'm glad I managed it well. So thanks again, George. I'm really excited for the discussion today. Let's jump right in. Tell us a little bit about the B2B playbook before we, get into the mainstream conversation on demand generation. So when you started the B2B playbook, what problem were you trying to solve at that time?
Yeah, definitely. Look, the B2B playbook is essentially our way of sharing our step-by-step framework for demand generation that we really wish we had. When I first got
Mhm.
deep into B2B marketing, I couldn't find a resource out there like it. And you have such limited time and resources, and it was just really difficult to find something that showed you end to end, this is what you need to do to generate demand. And so I found myself Googling and reading and testing different strategies and tactics on, websites like HubSpot's blog, and read a ton from marketing leaders like Seth Godin and Russell and all kinds of people. Was testing what worked, what didn't work on our different clients. And in the end, we realized that we actually had a really great framework for sustainable B2B growth, one that was really different to what you would find if you just Googled things out there, because you just end up with a whole lot of tactics. And once we had something that we felt was simple to understand, we said, let's share this with people because it's the resource we wish we had. So we sat down, we realized that it would take us far too long to write it as a book. And we decided to release it as a podcast series. And that's what we did. It took us about 120 episodes, and now we're about 150 or so, always showing step by step a framework for Gen.
That is amazing. I've myself gone through the P2P playbook, heard a lot of podcasts, and I think you guys are doing an amazing job over there. So I'm now a loyal listener, so one of your loyal subscribers. So yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
it's just those happen to me. I mean, I've now caught on to the habit of driving to work, listening to podcasts, and I think yours is one that stays in my favorite list. So I'm definitely playing one of those while driving out.
Thank you so
Okay.
much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's very kind. I'll definitely pass that on to Kevin. Hopefully offers something a little bit different to the others out there.
So, George, of course, when I was doing my whole reading for our discussion today, there are certain data points that I came across. One of them says that 67% of B2B marketers report challenges in proving ROI for demand gen efforts. Marketers, of course, they're drowning in data, struggling to get sales and marketing aligned. Ultimately, we are all perhaps some of us are missing targets. Now, the credit for that largely goes to what we call the great divide, the misalignment between sales and marketing. Now, speaking of the great divide, do you see the gap between sales and marketing shrinking anytime soon, or do you think things have really changed and we are on a better foot now?
I wish I could say yes. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that it is. Maybe a little bit in our LinkedIn bubble, but I think widely it's definitely there. And I speak to a lot of marketers every week, and they're all dealing with this enormous divide. I think maybe part of it is because a lot of the marketing and sales education that comes out there is from those B2B SaaS tech companies. And a
Right.
lot of them have these huge money ramps, and they're able to use go-to-market strategies that brute force their way into the market with sales. They burn cash and resources. People adopt, still using the predictable revenue model, which I think is now starting to prove to be not the most efficient way to go to market and to acquire new customers. And it just creates this enormous appetite for leads at all costs. And then that responsibility gets passed on to marketing. So marketing gets
Mhm.
handcuffed to doing lead generation. they don't get the opportunity then to use their budget, funds, and time to do any real marketing, then that means that often the leads that they hand over just aren't high quality. Sales aren't having great conversations because of them. And it just breaks down this trust between the two teams more and more and more. I think as well, there's just this increasing obsession to measure the ROI of every marketing activity, which again makes it hard to collaborate with sales. We need to be acting as one go-to-market team, but the model that we're using, the way sales and marketing are compensated and measured, it just doesn't encourage that at all. I would love to know kind of how you see it from your perspective, if you think that things are heading in the right direction, or perhaps it's just a small bubble that we live in on LinkedIn.
I think largely I agree with you. We're still in the bubble. We're trying to solve, and I think every day there is this definite intent to figure out how do we, work work on this misalignment and get this closer. Technology, of course, has a huge role to play over there, but the way technology works, it's garbage in, garbage out. So, the way technology is being used, how the analysis is being done, how it is being acted upon, and how it's not being used in a manner that one is blaming the other is still, I guess, needs to be figured out. Of course, I remember a quote about marketing that I read somewhere, which was something like the purpose of marketing is to know and understand the customer so well that the product or service fits them and just sells itself. Now, we're far from there in many scenarios, and I think it's time for both sales and marketing to embrace that mindset and make it less about departments and more about a unified journey. So, of course, one thing to start with is, for example, both need to have a shared definition of what makes a qualified lead. I think it just starts from there. Everyone's definition of an MQL and SQL and SAL and everything is very different, and there are basic gaps over there, which changes the whole, assessment of what output is coming out from this entire exercise of, trying to sell your service or product. So on that note, George, when I was doing my research, I saw a great, fantastic resource on your website, a 10-step guide to sales and marketing alignment. So do you want to touch upon that? Do you want to take us through a few pointers from there?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just share my screen. I've actually got it here for you. So anyone viewing can check out this resource that we built. Pardon me. Essentially, it's a 10-step guide for marketing and sales to start aligning and playing on the same team. So if we've touched it already, but look, the research shows that when sales and marketing teams are working together, when they're aligned, companies achieve 19% increase in revenue growth and they're 15% more profitable. I would guess that it's actually probably more than that, but that's what the research has showed so far. But the actual how to align sales and marketing, I think, is something that not enough people have talked about in depth. And so we wanted to draw on our own experience and collaborate with some other people to pull together a whole bunch of exercises that sales and marketing can work through together to try and achieve this alignment, to align on things like you referenced earlier, basic deal stages, basic definitions of what's an MQL, what's an SQL, what's an opportunity. So we have complete alignment. So we've basically laid out, I think it's 40 something questions to get people to work through a set process. Now, ideally, you have someone from marketing and someone from sales sit down together, and over a couple of sessions, they go through and they talk about what do these questions, what do these definitions mean to them? What does it mean to marketing? What does it mean to sales? Can we reconcile and come together with the joint definition? So that starts with understanding each other's business metrics and goals, understanding who are our ideal customers. And we talk about that people don't align on what an MQL is, but very often we're not even aligning on who are our best customers and
Right.
who
Absolutely.
do we as a go-to-market team want to even try and influence and win our next book of business for the next quarter, 6 months, a year. We've got to align on these fundamentals. And so this guide effectively takes you through how to do that, how to align on the buying journey. So sales and marketing can be equally helpful because, to be honest, Shubhra, my belief is that sales and marketing should ultimately be having the same conversation. They should be communicating the same kind of message. Just marketing is excellent at doing that on a one-to-many and a one-to-few basis, and sales are really good at doing that on a one-to-one. But we should be aligning on the messages that we're communicating.
Absolutely. I've gone through this guide in detail, George, and I think there are some there are reiterations over there. There are things that I think, in the process of overcomplicating the entire journey, we kind of forget to go back to the basics and touch upon. So I think you guys have done a good job of making sure it's all in one place, and we get reminded of, how this needs to be kind of made simpler.
Yeah, and the basics is where it is. And I think you already touched on it, with all these tools and techs, you put garbage in, you get garbage out. And you can do so much by aligning on the basics. And I think more people need to start with the basics and align on the basics and do the basics well, because sometimes they're hard to do well, and then use the tools and tech after to help optimize and supplement your work on the basics.
Right. All right. So with that, let's now delve into the world of demand generation, the buzzword for today. So often B2B marketers throw around terms like demand generation, lead generation, demand capture interchangeably. So for the knowledge of our listeners and viewers, do you want to touch upon how these are different, or are these different? The three words: demand gen, demand capture, and lead generation.
Yeah, for sure. So demand generation, I think it's an overall definition. The way we view it is it's a go-to-market strategy that builds an intense desire in your target customer to buy from you. And in order to do that, we see demand generation being made up as demand creation and demand capture. Now, demand capture targets that 5% of people who are in the market who are ready to buy right now. So if you have a product or a service, there are people who are actively searching for that product or service right now. And demand capture is about going out there and trying to get them and turn them into customers. This is where every business should start. It's where most do start. And the issue is, people don't realize that that's only 3 to 5% of the market who are actively looking right now. And so they all hit this, right. So they all hit this point where they're trying to capture more and more demand. But as they're doing it, guess what? So are your competitors. And so you reach a point where it becomes too expensive to capture that existing demand, because your competitors are trying to do it too. You're competing for attention. The prospect hasn't been aware of you before they started looking for a solution, and it becomes a bit of a bloodbath. And so that doesn't scale forever. So what's the answer? What else can we do? Well, we've got to start to look to create demand. And create demand simply just means getting in front of those other potential customers who aren't in market right now, but could be one day. And we need to first, pardon me, we need to first make them prioritize the problem that you solve and convince them that they should frame their problem with your solution. And two, we need to lead them to the logical conclusion that you are the perfect people to do it for them. So that's effectively what demand creation is doing, is it's getting in front of that 95% of the market. So when they're ready to buy, they come to you over the competition. And it's really the only way a business can scale.
Right. And I think very often this whole demand creation or generation is then confused with lead generation in terms of creating like an instant output. I think demand generation is more long term, where you go and start becoming more visible, and there is a recall that you build, and there is a likability that you start building, and the whole nurture process. Lead generation is more instant in terms of form fills, downloads, so it's a subset over there. So yeah, but I think the analogy that's fitted into my head is the bloodbath that you spoke about. So somewhere I'm imagining the set of marketers actually getting into one, because you're right. It's a kind of bloodbath itself that we get into at the end of the day.
It is. It is. And you see it all the time, especially if you've been a performance marketer and if you're out there, in demand capture channels like Google Ads. And things normally start off okay because you target, search terms with really high intent, people who are really ready to buy your solution right now.
Yeah.
But there's only so many of those per month that are actively searching for your solution. And so then you start to broaden the searches that are captured and it gets a little less specific. And then it becomes harder and harder to convince those people to choose you over the competition. And then those clicks become more expensive and those sales conversations become harder. And that's where that bloodbath happens.
Correct. So that's a great breakdown, George. Now, some B2B marketers, they get stuck in a lead gen rut, prioritizing immediate results over building long-term demand, like I said, because, could be various reasons. There could be a management pressure, there could be a self-made pressure or anything like that. Now, while understandable, what are your thoughts on this approach, and what would your guidance be to these marketers?
For the marketers that are under pressure from leadership to continue lead generation, is that
Yeah,
correct?
that is
Yeah, look,
correct.
my advice is always, look, if it isn't broken, there's no need to fix it. So if that lead generation that you're creating is working for your business, if those leads are turning into good opportunities, and if you calculate the amount that it's cost to get you to the lead, the amount that it's cost sales to service that lead, and that all works with the deal size that's coming in, fantastic. Keep doing it.
Mm,
But if you do it and you find that the cost to get these leads, the cost to service them, and the end result isn't worth it for the business, well, then all of a sudden we've got a business case where we got to say we need to change something. And if you run that calculation and you do need to change something, well, that's when I would say you need to start exploring demand generation. And so our approach is typically to try and carve out 10% of existing budget from existing lead generation activities. Like we can't go cold turkey overnight. We can't completely change our go to market overnight because, you know, this is real life and these are real people's jobs. Instead, let's carve out 10% of our budget and time, allocate it to a narrow product and segment, prove that we can generate demand, that we deeply understand customers, that we're ushering them through the buying journey, that it's leading to a more efficient method for acquisition. And once that is proved out, roll it out to other segments and then start to, over time, increase the amount of budget and effort that you're putting into demand generation. That's our recommendation. Again, if it isn't broke, don't fix it, but run the numbers, work with whoever you need to work with to do that.
absolutely. I think that's a very, very wise piece of advice over there. But at the same time, George, demand generation can feel very overwhelming because of all these matrices and methods of measurement, and the whole martech stack out there, and people trying everything and showing an ROI. I mean, there is a lot of noise also in terms of people creating magic with every demand gen framework out there, and then then you wonder that, are you missing out? Is there something you're not doing correct? Someone's got 250% output from a certain method, and I'm still struggling with a 50% increase. So those things happen. But of course, frameworks are great starting points, but they need to be adapted to your specific business goals, your audience. So, what are your thoughts on the practicality of these perfect demand gen frameworks in the real world of B2B? And while frameworks can be helpful, the whole B2B world is complex. So, is it um, does it really make demand generation easy?
Look, let me just first start off by saying that there is no silver bullet, there is no magic potion. Demand generation is fundamentally good, solid marketing principles that are based around building trust with your audience, that are based around a keen understanding, and then making sure that you relentlessly execute it to do it. So there's no magic tactic to do this. And So that's why actually I love frameworks. I think frameworks are fantastic because they're not grounded in specific channels. So you might Google, a demand generation framework, but what you actually end up getting is a tactic. And it might be a way of executing it using outbound marketing. It might be a way of executing it using SEO or LinkedIn ads. And then people have all these different ideas as to what demand generation really is. But if you boil it down to its most basic, what we're trying to do is we are trying to build relationships with future buyers. How do we do
Right.
that? Well, we have to first understand exactly why an existing set of buyers bought from us over the competition. Like, we have to understand what our competitive edge is. Then we have to understand how does it help them in their everyday life. Then we have to understand why did they choose us, and where else is it that they hang out online and offline? What did their buying journey look like so we know how to influence them? We need to know what that buying committee looks like. So we create this roadmap of this is what we need to say to our future set of customers to turn them into existing customers. And then it's all about actually going out and consistently getting that messaging to answer those questions. And then the third part is distribution. We need people to actually see this stuff. And
Right.
distribution comes in the form of SEO. Distribution comes in the form of outbound. It comes in the form of LinkedIn social, LinkedIn ads. It comes in Google ads. It's just distribution, and you just got to choose the channels that are right for you. And that's where I see frameworks actually being incredibly helpful, because you're right, the B2B world is complex, but if we all just agree it's about building relationships, that means we've got to start with our research. We've got to understand how to build these relationships, what we need to say to people, and then it's about getting that information in front of people. And then you can choose your channel to execute that accordingly.
Absolutely. So, George, again, going back to your, B2B playbook resource guide, I saw 5B's demand generation framework out there, which you guys heavily promote and talk about. And I think it's incredibly helpful. Do you want to walk us through the key elements of the 5B's framework?
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think probably the first three Bs are what we would call the fundamentals. And I think it's the really hard stuff that sounds simple that everyone is missing. And once you get these down, these are the ones that are going to make a really big difference in your demand gen program. And everything else after that is going to be incremental improvements. So the
Right.
first three Bs are what we call be ready, be helpful, and be seen. Be ready is all about truly deeply understanding your customers. You need to know who your best customers are. You've got to understand their pain points. You need to understand that buying committee. You got to know what their buying journey looks like, where they hang out, who influences their buying decisions. And then you got to make sure that your business is positioned to be a complete no-brainer for them. So when they come to you, they go, I am home. This is the right place for me to be. This then gives you that understanding of who your best customers are, why they bought from you, how to find more like them, and what you need to say to them to become new customers. So that's be ready. That's the hard work of deeply defining, understanding your next target market. The second
Right.
stage is what we call be helpful. And to what I was discussing earlier, that's all about how we answer questions for buyers to usher them through that buying journey, and also to develop relationships with them through helpful and educational content. This content should make the lives of your prospects better. It's not necessarily product focused content, but it helps them in their role, is educating and entertaining, and also ushers them through that buying journey. It's exactly what we do with our podcast, the B2B Playbook. It's really, really important in this stage that your content is driven by subject matter experts, because content has been so commoditized and people just want real insights from experts. And then it's about distributing that where your dream customers are hanging out so they see it and it guides them through their buying journey. The third stage is what we call be seen. So we had be ready, which is deeply understanding customers. Second stage is be helpful, building relationships of trust with educational content. The third stage is be seen. And that's all about accelerating that relationship building process and generating that demand faster. That's where you start to connect this with things like paid media You're pushing this content to the buying committee. It's where you start to identify accounts that are expressing more intent and to try and accelerate that demand using things like account-based marketing. These are our fundamentals for demand generation. The next two stages are more advanced stages, but the big movements in your demand gen program are going to come from relentlessly executing those first 3 Bs of our 5 Bs framework.
But out of curiosity, what are the remaining two?
Yeah, absolutely. The fourth one is what we call be better. And that's about optimizing your existing workflow now that you have those fundamentals in place. So we cover things in there like A/B testing, CRO, advanced content repurposing, advanced tracking and reporting, nurturing, leveraging CRMs, CDPs, data, using partners and affiliates. And then the fifth B, be the best, is where we look at the advanced tactics that's normally reserved for the bigger players, using things like neuroscience and psychology to try and do everything you can to influence that dream customer and turn them from a prospect to a buyer.
That sounds like a solid foundation. I'm sure our listeners are going to also pretty much benefit from it. Now, with ABM taking center stage, George, especially in the B2B world, how do you think success is getting measured? Of course, leads, form fills, they're becoming relics of the past, and they're becoming standard in this whole method of measurement. And with ABM, you need to measure the impact you're having on those precise accounts that you're targeting, and it's a much smaller set of your dream accounts, or the red hot accounts, or whatever you may call them, but that you're chasing. So pipeline progression, engagement levels, and ultimately you're talking about closed deals. So importance of, for example, measuring the customer lifetime value as an ABM success metric is also gaining ground. But what else? What are the other success metrics when we talk about ABM?
Yeah, I think people need to focus more on the quality of interactions when it comes to measuring ABM. So things like, okay, we're targeting certain accounts. We want to take a more tailored approach to our account-based marketing. That's what it should be. So do we have all the key contacts for the account? Have we mapped it out so we understand what that buying committee looks like? And then, have we completed relationship building activities? Like, have we had good engagements with key people in a roundtable? Have we invited them on our podcast? Have they come on that podcast? Have we invited them to participate in market research report? And tracking, like, are we continuing to have these engagements and deepen this relationship with key people in key target accounts? Things like, have we secured an internal champion? Have we worked with them to establish and build a business case? Have we worked with them to understand what that buying journey looks like? Who comes into the decision-making process and when? Do we have an executive sponsor for this deal? And I think these are some of the things that we're probably missing and need to be talking about and measuring more actively, as opposed to, as you said, those old dated measurements like how many lead forms we got from target accounts and that kind of thing. So I think these kind of measurements are really, really important to supplement when you're looking at ABM.
Absolutely valid points, and it's kind of becoming like an eye opener for me also, because I think in our measurement metrics, and especially all the platforms also that you look at in terms of the leverages that you're, in terms of the martech stack you have, you're really not measuring these, or you don't have scoring templates that are capturing these as of now. They're more focused on still the clicks and the impressions, and how many times the ad's been seen, and the journey, the whole time being spent, and things like that. But we're still missing out on a lot of new, more valuable elements, I feel, that we need to incorporate. And what are the, like you said, what are the quality conversations you're having, and how are you really nurturing that conversation to overall make that prospect a buyer in future? So absolutely, George, with you on that. But at the same time, ABM can be very, very resource intensive. So it of course requires a very good grip on the buyer segment. You need to know your customers or your prospects really, really well. even the content needs to be extremely targeted. It's not about the frills and fancies, but how do you make it valuable? And of course, then there are certain specialized tools that you require for you to be able to put together the ABM stack and the method in place. So why do you think uh, I mean, or what do you think are the main reasons why certain companies still struggle to implement successful ABM programs? Now, while cost is one factor, I think what I wanted you to touch upon is in terms of, is there still an understanding gap when it comes to ABM with a mass pray and pray model, or is there something else? So, why do you think certain companies still struggle to implement successful ABM campaigns? And here I want you to touch upon not the cost factor, because that is understood, but more than that, is there still an understanding gap? Is there something that they still need to figure out, that an ABM campaign needs a different methodology, a different strategy, and a different outlook altogether versus a mass spray and pray lead generation model? Do you think any of those gaps are still existing, especially in the B2B world?
Absolutely. I think so many people think that account-based marketing is buying an ABM platform, a really expensive ABM platform, slapping together the dream logos that they'd love to work with, and they just run a whole lot of outbound and display ads to these people. And then they try and measure intent and engagement based on that to then trigger some kind of, more manual outreach sequence. When the reality is most of them are, again, missing those fundamentals that we talk about. You can actually you can run a really great account-based marketing program out of a spreadsheet. You don't even need these tools and technology really to do this. I mean,
Mhm.
where most people go wrong is they're treating account-based marketing as a one-to-many exercise when it should be a really tailored one-to-one exercise. And so they're not deeply understanding why they are targeting certain accounts. Don't start with 100 dream logos. Start with 10, maybe 20 accounts that are already expressing some kind of intent to work with your brand. And then you should use it as a way of accelerating a relationship building process. And you don't do that necessarily with advertising and outbound email. Like, look at
Mhm.
developing relationships with humans. And if the deal size is big enough to warrant that, then it's worth the time to have them on your podcast to build a deep relationship, or invite them to a roundtable, or invite them to co-host a webinar, or do something like that. But
Right.
we need to do those fundamentals of really deeply understanding what's important to these accounts, why they qualified to work well with us, how we can clearly make a business case. And yeah, I would say work hard and run it out of a spreadsheet first. You will understand what works and what doesn't work far better. And then once you have that down, then maybe it's time to scale it and move to tools and tech to amplify that.
I'd just like to add a few points to what you said. I think it also requires a shift in mindset, and here I'm putting the marketers in the spot. But as marketers, we've all started with a volume based approach. So I think somewhere in our minds we are also stuck with that, and we kind of creating a mashup of a volume based approach plus an account based approach, and the mashup doesn't work. It just messes things up. So you're trying to have like the best of both the worlds, but that's not how it works, and that's where we need to be very, very clear. And secondly, I think again, because of the volume based approach, we are bound to look at results in quickly. So we are used to looking at results quickly, and ABM takes time, so we become impatient. So my earlier point of management pressure and all of that, I think a lot of times it's also because we're not able to really make that educate them on how ABM really works and when they should start seeing the results. And there is no immediate ROI in month one that's going to come in, but that's an investment that goes in. So yeah, I think I would also go with just adding another point to that one.
They're excellent points. I couldn't agree more. And I think that plays into the much larger conversation of marketers these days. For some reason, we're just expected to constantly expect results from every activity that we're doing. And it just, if you speak to any buyer and ask them how they ended up buying from you, it doesn't align really
Yeah.
with most of them in their own buying journey. I always use the example, I might have 5 conversations in one day with people who want to work with our business. If I ask them at what point they first discovered us, some discovered us 2 years ago, others 18
Mm,
months ago, some 6 months ago, and some discovered me yesterday. Now,
yeah.
I just happened to catch that person yesterday at the exact right time, but it's so hard to find those people, and there's only a certain number of people out there who did it. But because I started that time ago, that meant that I had 6 very interested people in working with me that day. Didn't happen
Absolutely.
overnight.
Absolutely. Okay, now that we're talking about ABM, we can't but talk about the martech stack. And so, George, any guidance on what's the minimum martech stack that a B2B marketer must have before diving into demand generation campaigns or before starting, venturing into the ABM world?
Yeah, look, on the demand generation side, I think you can keep it extremely light. I actually think you can run a complete ABM and demand gen program for really just really just using the free tiers of most products out there. It's great to have all your data in one place. We love using HubSpot for that. We find it's very, very useful for making sure that you have that data there. You're able to export it to analyze what segment you should target so you can get in touch with those customers, so you can get those customer insights. I think it's a great place to start. Their free tier is normally more than enough. Um, Being able to track and measure whether your demand gen campaigns are working or the leading indicators of success, I think is really important, because that's where so many demand gen programs go wrong, is people aren't able to prove that it's on the right track. One thing that does that really well is self-reported attribution, getting sales to have a conversations with people about how they first discovered you, having self-reported attribution as a form on your website, asking people, how did you first hear about us? Looking at other metrics like if you're distributing your content on social, LinkedIn give you data as to who's engaging with your posts, who's viewing your content. And then even looking at things like, okay, Clearbit for free tell you if your ICP are visiting your website. And so that's the
Mhm.
thing that we look at really, really regularly is, are we getting more people from our ICP visiting our website month on month? Now, Clearbit have a free tier where they will basically give you an uncapped amount of people an uncapped number of people that are visiting your website and de-anonymize them for you. To be honest, like, that's as far as your tech stack needs to go to begin with. And then I think with account-based marketing, you can actually run a lot of that out of a spreadsheet. You can write down manually uh, who the contacts are in each of the key accounts, the actions that you're going to take to connect and reach out to them, what the next steps are. So to me, that is actually enough just to begin with. I'd be very curious to hear your point of view. But we are used to doing things at the very, very basic foundational level, and then scaling up with tools and tech after that.
Um, So in practice, that's pretty much how we've also kind of scaled our systems. I think we started with a very, very basic stack when we, started our demand lead generation model, and of course, CRM becomes like a fundamental, basic requirement for sure. But as we've scaled into an ABM model, we do see that there is a requirement to add, say, a website de-anonymization platform or a data enrichment platform and things like that. So those are additions that are coming in, and or an email automation platform that weaves into the whole stack, and others, multiple those, basically to be able to keep mining more information and be able to look at information beyond what's there superficially. So I agree with that, George. And I think where marketers kind of And I think I was there about a few years back when, I was getting introduced to the whole concept of ABM. I felt it cannot start with a heavy tech stack. And therefore it's not for us because we are a mid-sized company. It is something which is owned by the large enterprises, and they are the ones who can play with ABM because they have those tech stack. But I think what you mentioned very correctly is people think they can just purchase an ABM platform and dump the data into it and it'll do its own magic. Doesn't work, which is why a lot of these platforms are not able to generate ROI after a year or so, and then they give up the subscriptions because there's no justification that happens in terms of the money being spent versus an ROI being generated. Um, Moving on from here, George, of course, uh, there is this whole noise that we've spoken about in terms of how it is tough for B2B marketers to now capture attention. There are those many buyers, and every company is trying to get their attention. And of course, there's a very large set of your prospects who are not in market, who are still just not considering, not just buying from you, they're not even considering the solution because maybe they have a ongoing relation with a vendor which they are satisfied with, etc., etc. So now I think this is where the whole nurture process through content comes into the picture. And content marketing and valuable content generation, and the whole education and knowledge that you start providing in order to nurture your prospects starts coming into the picture. I'm very curious about understanding what are the kind of demand generation strategies that you've deployed at the B2B Playbook or the B2B Incubator, which is your course that you provide to demand gen professionals. Out of everything that we've spoken about, what are those 3 or 4 things that you have implemented that have really worked for you, and what kind of success it has given?
Yeah, the foundation of what we do is deeply understanding that buying journey. Because once you understand what that looks like, it's about trying to get that in front of people and meet them where they are with that. I think this whole idea that we can target people with the exact right message at the exact right time, it's just not true. Like we can't necessarily do that. But what we can do is we can map out basically what the buying journey looks like. And our favorite framework for doing that is called the 5 stages of awareness. It's the 5 stages that someone goes through from being unaware that they even have a problem that you can help them with, to being led to the logical conclusion that you're the perfect solution and fit for them. And those stages are unaware, problem aware, solution aware, where they start comparing you to other solutions out there, product aware, where they start reviewing your case studies and features and all of that, and then most aware, which is the final stage where they're pretty close to purchasing. And it's really, really important to make sure that you understand what content is going to progress people through that buying journey. So every single piece of content we put out, we make sure that it is aligned to one of those 5 stages of awareness. And then it literally just becomes about distribution. And so making sure that we are getting those 5 stages of awareness content consistently in front of our ICP. And we understand where our ICP are and where they hang out and what resonates with them because we talk to them all the time. And so, to be honest, that has been one of the biggest things for us, because those 5 stages of awareness guide them through their buying journey. It educates them at every step of the way. It builds relationships with them because it actually helps them in their job before they even work with us. I mean, what a way to build a relationship with someone, right? It's just like real life. Your friends are
Right.
people who help you. Help someone before you're ready to work with them. And then when they're ready to work with someone that solves that problem, they're going to choose you over the competition. It'll be a complete no brainer. So that's been a really, really key thing for us. And then it's about, okay, how do we use tools and tech to supplement and accelerate what we're doing? Okay, so key to what we're doing is making sure that marketers in our ICP see our helpful content. We want them to see our 5 stages of awareness content. We post that on LinkedIn every day. How do we make sure they see it? Well, we make sure that we have marketers who are in our ICP added to our network every single day. that would take me 20, 30 minutes to do that manually. So I use a tool called Dripify to do that automatically. It's been doing that for a couple of years. And now we have a huge network of B2B marketers that have been exposed to our content for a really long time. How do we make sure that they see those 5 stages of awareness content? We just have a simple system. Monday, we promote unaware content. Tuesday, problem aware. Wednesday, solution aware, and so on. And then we need to, of course, have an engine behind all of this, because this would just be so much content to pump out every day. So how do we do that? Well, we're firm believers in starting with a pillar piece of content that you commit to recording every couple of weeks or once a month. For us, it's our podcast. And that is then repurposed to then get in front of our dream customers wherever it is that they're hanging out. So our podcast every week turns into, again, the 40-minute podcast, a 40-minute YouTube episode. We use AI to assist us in turning that into our LinkedIn post that you see. We use AI to assist us turning it into articles that you see. We use it to help us turn that into newsletters, and about 8 to 10 YouTube shorts and TikToks. And we do that every single week on top of running our business. And we're able to do that in about 5 hours because we have systems and processes behind it.
I think that's beautifully summed up, because I think what you're doing is content marketing at its best and in the most optimal manner, where you I'm assuming you've not made it like an elephant and it's not very difficult to feed and move, but it's something which is well fed, well nourished, and you're just kind of nurturing it week on week for it to grow. So I think kudos to the team for being able to set up this process and systems, because I think that's a huge trouble area for marketers to figure out. How do you keep the content engine running, but not just running, keep it relevant and valuable? Those two aspects are sometimes, most often, very badly missed out. Of course, we can't stop this topic of demand generation without touching upon Gen AI. Uh, that's the flavor of the season. I would also think that it's like now the dying flavor of the season very quickly, because there was this whole hype cycle, and either people have gotten bored about talking it, or they're still figuring out what's meant to do. But what are your thoughts on Gen AI fueling the entire demand gen effort, and how has it changed your life as a marketer in terms of any kind of further process optimizations or augmentation of effort that Gen AI has been able to do?
I think for some of us, it's making us even worse marketers, because I mean, I've spoken with a lot of people, and instead of doing solid customer research and speaking directly to customers, they're just asking the questions to ChatGPT, and that misses the whole point. Like, we're just constantly trying to take shortcuts. And I think for the marketers that are doing that, to take shortcuts, it's making us worse. We're missing doing those foundational things that we need to do. But if you have those foundations in place, it can definitely make a whole lot of processes a lot faster. For us, we are using it, as I mentioned before, to assist us in not creating that original pillar piece of content that comes from our own subject matter expertise, that comes from our stories and experiences, which is, I think, what people want to read in content, right? It's what sets you apart from the other top 10 search results in Google that have just been spat out by ChatGPT. So the way that we use it is we record our pillar content, and it's based on our own experiences and stories. We then feed that into AI, and we have a series of prompts to get AI to act essentially as a journalist, to then turn that into stories, to sound like us, to turn into stories, to use direct quotes, which is what helps us write these really human sounding articles. And it sounds human because it's pulling out our direct quotes and our direct words. And using it in that sense and creating templates around that has been a huge uplift for us in terms of productivity and helping drive that content repurposing engine faster and making it easier as well. I think that there's a little bit of danger into what people are doing when they're using it for a lot of outbound marketing. I'm sure you've seen a lot of it going around now where everyone is using it to try and do mass personalization.
Yeah.
And and that just never lands, right? Like, I think humans are pretty smart. We can sniff it out. And again, it misses the point. Relevance trumps personalization any day. You only
Mm.
achieve relevance. Why do you need this thing right now? If you really understand your customer. Going out there with personalization and saying, "Hey, I saw you got this new role and congratulations. It must be such a big challenge doing XYZ. And by the way, we do this, which helps you do XYZ." That's that's not that's not going to work. It's relevance over personalization. So it can be used well, but like stop trying to guess your customers' problems. AI is not the way to do that. Solid customer research, doing the foundations is. And once you do that, then look at AI to supplement that and accelerate that.
I couldn't agree more. And there is this ethical aspect also to consider, right? How do we ensure that personalization doesn't, at the end of the day, become creepy? And so, yeah, transparency, respect for privacy, and not coming across as a stalker, a social media stalker. Those are key, and that AI can't figure out. There are hallucinations, and there are informations that are that really don't need to be put forth when you're trying to really have like a customer connect being created and stuff like that. So I think the human intelligence for thankfully, I mean, it's going to stay, otherwise it was trouble for us for sure. But how do we make sure that personalization is value driven and not intrusive and not getting into their personal space? I think that's something that still needs to be figured out. And you're right, we are able to sniff out uh, what's AI generated and what truly is valuable in terms of the communication. So well said, George. Now we are moving towards the end of our discussion, but before we end, of course, there are certain things we spoke about in terms of nurturing relationships, nurturing prospects, the long-term approach, and all of that. So, speaking of long-term, what do you see as the future of B2B demand generation?
Gee, the future. That's a great question. I think the future is actually going back to basics. I think it's going back to the fundamentals. I think that it's easier and easier for people to take a mass one to many approach. A while ago, it used to be really hard to set up and run, a campaign on Meta to get your ads in front of a lot of people. It used to be hard to do that on Google, but the barrier to entry gets lower. It used to be hard to write listicles and articles, but now AI has helped us do that, and the barrier has become lower. It used to be hard to send mass outbound, but now we just spoke about how easy it is to send mass outbound that's semi-personalized. Might not be good, but the point is there's so much noise out there. And that's why I think if we go back to the fundamentals of really understanding people, giving them what they want, building relationships, and ensuring that we can remain consistent and turn ourselves into a complete no brainer for them, that's where the future is. Because when we're surrounded by noise and decisions, where do we go back to? We go back to who we trust. And that can come in the form of the company, it can come in the form of a referral and your network, but it comes from
Right.
people who really truly understand you.
Excellent advice, George. I think focus on building strong relationships. Networking, of course, is crucial, and never stop learning. Uh, Now, the B2B landscape, of course, it will continue to evolve. So stay curious, keep experimenting. Uh, and when you're genuinely excited about what you do, I guess it just shows in your work. So, but before we wrap up, let's just lighten the mood for a bit. And I have a fun question for you at the end of this segment. So, if you had one superpower for a day, what would it be and why?
Oh, wow. I would say, oh, I'd love to fly. I would absolutely love to fly. I could fly over. I could be there with you in the room right now. We could have this conversation. I could fly to Greece and I could go and soak up some warm weather right now. And Superman is definitely my favorite superhero. I look at birds and I'm a little bit jealous. I would love to fly. What about you? What would yours be?
I think I would go with infinite energy. I'm a mom of two, and I think I am so drained out. In my, I've been drained out for many years now. So now I just need a little bit more energy in my life.
Oh my God. I'm actually expecting our first child at the end of the year. And so I think maybe my answer might change next year if you ask me
Yeah, yeah.
again.
We'll definitely chat up once you get there. But congratulations for that.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations to you and your wife for getting into a new phase, and it's truly very exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, we're very, very excited.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us, George. It was, as expected, a lovely, lovely conversation. I was really looking forward to this one, and it's been just fantastic. I'm sure our listeners have gained valuable insights. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Denpulse Season 2, Signal to Sales. And thanks for sticking through. And if you'd like to learn more about Denave's AI-powered demand generation solutions, visit us at www.denave.com. And for the rest of the Denpulse episodes, catch us on Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube for some power-packed discussions. Once again, thank you, George. Thanks for taking out time for this.
Thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed catching up, and thank you to your listeners and viewers.